Perfect, you're good to go.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so hi everybody, welcome to the March 13th Add-ons community meeting. If you haven't already, if you could add your name to the attendees list, that would be fabulous. I wanted to give a quick shout out to a member of our add-on reviewer team, ETT. ETT has been a reviewer with us for a little over 2 years now. And ETT is also a Mozilla rep, and he's been nominated this month to be featured as Mozillian of the Month this month. So I think ETT is great. He's done a lot of outreach and advocacy work for Firefox in Taipei, where he lives. He's been a really great member of the add-on reviewer team. He's taught folks how to build extensions. He's a really great guy. So I would just encourage y'all, if you can, to slide on over to the forum and vote for him and show him a little bit of love from the add-ons group. So congratulations to ETT for the nomination, and he's Mozilla of the Month for us. Okay, so I wanted to give everyone a quick update about what we've been working on in Q1 and how that fits into our 2019 roadmap. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share two slides. They're not super in-depth, but hopefully this will give a little bit of a better picture about kind of what we are looking like, kind of what our long-term plans are, and then we can kind of like fill in a couple of details about where we are in progress to those goals. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so our 2019 roadmap is basically we want to maintain a healthy add-ons ecosystem. So that means we want developers to continue developing extensions for Firefox. We want to continue reviewing those extensions and making sure that they're, they meet our add-on policies and that they're also safe for users. And we want to keep our theming community alive. So we want users to continue discovering and using extensions. With the small caveat that we also want to make the add-ons ecosystem safer for users. So that's kind of a broad mandate, and that's what I kind of want to delve into a little bit today. So we've identified kind of 4 tracks in how we want to approach kind of this broader mandate of how do we make the add-ons ecosystem safer for our users. So we've got a couple of smaller buckets that we're basically putting our projects into for 2019. So we've talked, Nick's blog post about making the add-ons ecosystem safer for users talks a little bit about discovery and curation. So that is something that is still being developed, but basically any extension that Mozilla puts in front of their users. So whether that's a featured extension, if it's in a blog post, if it gets recommended to you via CFR, the contextual feature recommender, we want to make sure that that lives up to the Mozilla brand promise of privacy and safety. So we want to make sure that all of those extensions are thoroughly vetted, usually by our admin review team, but it basically means that we're going to be scrutinizing those a little bit more, and also on kind of the other side, so on the discovery side from AMO, that maybe those extensions get bumped a little bit higher in the search when you go to look for them. So they're the ones that kind of get surfaced to the user first, and maybe some of the extensions that have low user count or don't have really great content of their product pages, maybe those get deprioritized and it's just a little bit harder for users to find those. So a lot of that work is still just coming out of the planning phase now, so we don't have a lot to report on there. So most of Q1 has been spent in the planning phase for discovery and curation, like what does that look like? What are some of the first milestones that we can achieve in that project? Like, what is that? The second one is user education and tools. So a lot of this is how can we help educate users about how they can keep themselves safe in the ecosystem. I think at the end of the day, we kind of acknowledge that it's a bit of the Wild West situation out there, especially in the unlisted extension world. So what are some tools that we can give users to help them protect themselves in case we're not able to protect them, first? So a lot of this has to do with expanding some of the documentation that we've been working on over the last 2 years about how users can understand permissions that extensions are requesting, how they can evaluate an extension to tell if it's safe based on the flags that they're getting from the permissions it's requesting and content on the product page, like what does the extension do, what kind of data does it access and protect. Right now, we're working on a Sumo article that's encouraging users to kind of do a little bit of spring cleaning and uninstall any extensions that they're not currently using. And again, the majority of extensions are safe, and this isn't an issue, but kind of like when you have a phone and you've got a bunch of apps that you have installed but you don't necessarily use, those apps could be sending data back to a third party that maybe you don't necessarily want. And so it's good to just remove those extensions and kind of eliminate that risk before it actually like turns into a real serious incident where stuff is happening that you don't necessarily want to happen. Some other stuff that's kind of in that bucket is just presenting users with relevant links to the safety articles that already exist. So a lot of that's going to happen in the door hangers on Firefox. So for example, when you go to install a new extension and you see that little door hanger that lists the permissions of the extension, you're now also going to see a link that takes you to that Sumo article about what those permissions mean. So it's just kind of closing the loop in a way of like, users may see the permissions and they're like, okay, whatever, but we're providing them a little bit of extra context about why we're presenting that information in that moment. And hopefully in that moment, they'll be interested and click on it and then go do a little bit of extra further learning. So we're also working on something where users can see what permissions extensions are requesting after installation. So right now, once you've got an extension installed, you can't tell. If you dismiss the door hanger, you can't really go back and tell what permissions it's using unless you go back to its page on AMO. So that's a little bit of extra legwork. Trishul and Siobhan have developed a really great extension called Permission Inspector that will actually just show you all of the permissions that your installed extensions are using. So that's super handy. We actually want to take that a step further and put that into Firefox. So that's right now probably going to land in a later Firefox release this year, assuming that all goes well. Unfortunately, in software development, no promises on the timeline. So that's kind of what we're working on with user tools. For extensions framework, so we want to see if there's anything we can do within the actual extensions framework itself to make add-ons safer without totally destroying developers' ability to do fun, cool, and interesting things with extensions. So we're kind of waiting to see. So at the same time we're doing this, Google is also making some proposals for their new Manifest v3. So we're kind of watching that at the moment to see what's happening in that space and if it makes sense to adopt any of those. We do diverge currently from Google in Manifest v2 in areas where we think it makes sense. So I think it's okay to say at this point that v3 has a lot. V3 is probably going to have a lot of proposals in it, and in order to maintain compatibility with Google, we're probably going to end up adopting a number of them, but again, probably not all of them. Or, especially if we take a look at it and we say, oh, this doesn't make sense for us, then we wouldn't adopt that part of v3. So that's kind of what's going on with extensions framework. Nothing major has landed recently, although I will provide an update about some cool new private browsing behavior. So that it's stuff that we can do on the back end that'll help make that a little bit better. And then operations, so this is the work that's being led by Andreas and Philip that I think a lot of y'all who are on this call today are already involved with. So that's kind of like developing a threat model, being a little bit more efficient in how we can discover malicious extensions, and then making sure that those malicious extensions are disabled and are blocked from Firefox. So users, it's kind of like the ultimate trigger that, if it means that we think that it's serious enough that even if you have it installed, we don't think the risk is worth it to you as a user. So Andreas is actually working on some cool stuff in that space. So I asked, or I'm telling him now that I put him on the agenda to talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. So again, a lot of Q1 was mostly planning. So I think that we're just now coming out of the planning stage in a lot of these areas and forecasting what the next 9 months of our year looks like. But this is basically like what we're driving to by the end of the year is having a healthy ecosystem that's safer and helping users discover great extensions that aren't going to be harmful to them. So at this point, I'd just like to ask if there are any questions about this. Okay, cool, awesome. Well, thank you all. So I saw Christoph asked a question about, a link to a Trello board where we can track some of these projects. We just don't have that right now. So sorry. Again, we just finished the planning phase. I can see if we can put something together to follow along with. Otherwise, I would say just tune in to the notes section of these community meetings and follow the blog to stay updated about some of the work that's happening in these spaces. Okay, thanks for listening to me talk a lot. So one new thing that's happened recently that is that we've changed extension behavior in private browsing. So this landed in Nightly last week. I think it was last week. Yeah, last week. Oh, that's exciting. So users now, so starting with Firefox 57, users will now have the ability to choose which extensions run in private browsing. So this brings us to parity with Chrome, so we're not making a super big deal about it. But basically, in the past, all extensions that had permission to run in Firefox also had permissions to run in Firefox private browsing. Oh my God, I'm sorry, Sylvain has a dog, and I'm very excited. Okay, we're going to circle back to that. So maybe you're doing things in private browsing that you don't necessarily want extensions to have access to. So now you have the ability to say, you know what, extension, I like you just fine in normal browsing, but in private browsing, I'd rather you just stay off. So what this means is that starting with Firefox 57, any new extensions that a user installs, the user will have to explicitly grant permission for those extensions to work in private browsing. All of their previously installed extensions will basically be grandfathered into having permissions to run in private browsing. And as developers, you can also put something in your manifest that says, hey, you know what, I don't even want this extension to have access to the private browsing windows. So that's a step that you can take as a developer if you just want to be like, you know what, I'm opting out entirely. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I'm going to turn it over to Andreas to talk a little bit about culture of experimentation and some of the work that he's doing on the discovering malicious extensions and disabling them side.
Sure. So a couple of initiatives are already on the way to optimize and make the review process more efficient. What the engineering team is currently working on is basically a complete rewrite of the file viewer for reviewers. So in case you haven't seen it yet, reviewers usually don't download the file that they are reviewing to their computer. We have a web interface where we can look at the contents of an add-on, like on the website, basically on AMO. That tool we call File Viewer is quite old, has some issues, and a while ago we decided that we need to give it some love, and basically it was decided that we completely rewrite it. That is currently happening, and you should see something, I would say, in the next weeks. There will be a minimal product to start with, which we're expanding iteratively. So yeah, it will work from the start. That is basically the requirement, and then we will add features over time. But it will be, in terms of features, it will be a little limited in the beginning, so we can roll it out earlier rather than later. Now, for the initiatives that are coming in the coming months, so what we want to focus on is adding more signals in terms of add-on behavior, add-on metadata that we see that allow us to more efficiently prioritize reviews that we are doing, and that will also include unlisted add-ons, which we are not focusing that much right now. But with these signals that we are currently coming up with, we're hoping that we're getting a better picture of the health of the ecosystem and be able to react much quicker on malicious add-ons or on suspicious add-ons, and therefore can give them a look shortly after they've been submitted, and take them down if needed. And that should hopefully contain some of the malware that we're seeing.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
I think it's pretty cool. So are you going to be using machine learning in any of the modeling?
Yes, I don't want to go too much into details,
Okay.
but it will be, we will try and use some AI, I said the word, to try and help us prioritizing and focusing on the right add-ons, because the volume is too much for humans to go through, so we need machines to assist us in helping us understand what we should look at first.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so reviews are still super important. So for folks who are really interested in, kind of partnering with us in 2019 for keeping the extensions ecosystem safer, reviewing is a great way to help for sure. Yeah, very cool. So on the same topic as kind of like review tools and review tools and reviewing, something that we have started talking about is a little bit of redesign for the review tools, or not the review tools, I'm sorry, the review queues on AMO. So Jorge, do you want to just share kind of like a broad overview of some stuff we've been talking about there?
You mean for curated extensions?
Yeah, or yeah.
Sure. So as Caitlin mentioned, we are working on highlighting a certain group of extensions that we're going to curate. And one of the things that we're going to be changing about the way we treat them is that they are going to be pre-reviewed. We're going to make sure that they are meeting our standards for every version. So they're going back to pre-review. They're a smaller set so that reviewers will be able to handle that load. And to that end, we need to make some changes to the reviewer tool so that it's easier for reviewers to find those extensions and review them quickly. So we're gonna make some refactoring of the review queues so that we have a queue specifically for those curated extensions, and there's going to be a separate queue for auto approval, which is the one we have, and we're also going to split out the static themes queue, which right now is kind of also mixed in with legacy extensions. So yeah, there are some changes coming up in Q2 to support that.
Question about this. Does it mean that for curated add-ons in the future, we'll go back to a standby mode where new uploads, new versions will need to be pre-approved before getting signed and published?
Yes.
Okay.
Super fun. The last thing that I wanted to ask the group about was a contributor reached out to me the other day and said, hey, what would be really great is if we had some documentation for accessibility in extensions. And I was like, oh, that's super interesting. So I just wanted to ask the developers in the room, what's your normal process for for designing or for building extensions with accessibility? And is there any documentation that you use beyond just kind of normal web accessibility guidelines?
I know there are standards about this, especially for websites, but we don't use them for developing add-ons for on my side where I'm working at.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So I don't know if y'all know Asa Dolzer. He's been around Mozilla since Mozilla was not even Mozilla. He's been around for a really long time. He's the new PM for accessibility for Firefox. So I might be reaching out to him to just kind of poke around a little bit and see if maybe that's something we could augment in our documentation specs. It'd be really cool if we could. All I know is that we broke a lot of accessibility extensions in Firefox 57, and I'm not really sure where things have moved since then. So cool. That wraps it up for stuff that I wanted to talk about today. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to share or add? Mike, I'm looking at you.
No, you covered everything that I was going to mention.
Okay.
Good job.
Anything else about the framework, the actual extension framework that's currently in progress?
No, we don't really have any definitive plans right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly on the front end stuff, user education, all the other things you mentioned. That's where most of the work's going.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So we have an update about the dog. His name is Teo, and he is Sylvain's CEO's dog. He is very cute. Please feel free to bring him to future meetings. He's really livened things up. Okay. Well, I think that's gonna wrap it up then. So I'll give you all 6 minutes back. Thanks for joining us today. Really great to see all of your faces, especially Xander's windswept hair. Xander, thanks for joining the call when you were out and about. It's pretty great. And we'll talk to y'all later.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.